You're listening to Power Talk, Berkeley Electric Cooperative's official broadcast about the cooperative, our communities, and ways to use energy wisely. And now, let's join our hosts for today's episode. Hello. This is Micah, Ponce, the communications guy with Berkeley Electric Cooperative, and we are back with another edition of Power Talk. And as always, I am joined by my lovely co-host, Miss Libby Roerig. How are you doing, Libby?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Another Saturday morning.
There we go. And we have in studio, for those of you who might be watching,
the legend.
very special guest, Mr. Tommy Harvey. How you doing, sir? He is the Director of Distribution Operations at Berkeley Electric Cooperative. What does that mean?
That's a fancy, I guess, a fancy title for somebody who chases a bunch of linemen week to week and day to day. That's about what that means.
Well, you weren't always the Director of Distribution Operations. How did you start out at the co-op? I mean, you've been here just a minute, sort of like I have. We're some of the old guard, I guess.
No, funny how that works. We for so many years you consider yourself the junior, the less tenured folks, and when you see our updates of work anniversaries and stuff come across Facebook or the inter-office email, you go, oh gosh,
who's that old guy?
No, I'm the one that's 20-something years. So I started back in the late 90s. I came into the company as on the line crew as a helper, and just stayed on the line crew. My first 18 or 19 years was on the line crew, and eventually was applied for and was selected for the current role that I have. It's, I guess in a lot of ways, probably served me well to have that background to come in and take responsibility for a whole lot of the things we do now. So
was BEC your first job, or did you do something before?
No, no, it was not my first job. I had a pretty diverse background since coming out of high school. Okay. I had 3 or 4 other roles in different fields than before I came here. So
cool.
Well, I mean, probably one of your major aspects of your job is something that is going to be kicking into high gear here soon is hurricane season and getting ready for storm season. Exactly. We start on June 1st is the official start of our storm season here in the Lowcountry. But, I mean, we really don't see anything. Really didn't kick up usually until, a little bit later into the fall?
So, yeah, I think September, October is kind of the peak time. And traditionally that's when our region of the coastline is most affected. Normally, it does not always happen that way. We had a storm last year, a year before, a named storm, several weeks before the season even kicked off. So it's something, obviously you guys are involved in it, that we do in early spring every year is review our major storm plan and that stuff. So we've already solidified all that, got everything nailed down for this year. The update's complete, and all that stuff's in place. So,
well, I mean, like before a storm, I mean, we always tell our members they have to get ready for a storm. What do we do in terms of preparing here at the co-op? I'm sure that folks are interested to know what we do to get our system ready.
So, like I just said, we back up into a couple of months ago now. We start reviewing our major storm plans. The first thing we do every year, after the first of every year, that's the first thing we engage is that, updating anything in the major storm plan from every attachment and document and contact that's in that plan to even digging through our material lists for each district that we have. Obviously, we have 4 districts, so we have different material demands at each district. So we dig through that and make sure we have storm supply for each location on hand. And if we don't, we obviously get it on order. In today's world with supply chain challenges everywhere you turn, we started that a little earlier this year for that reason. So.
But we really work all year to prepare for storm season. And, I like to tell people hurricane season isn't a season for us. We're working every day to build redundancies and to make our system more resilient, which is a challenge. Growing as fast as we are, we got to maintain our existing system as well as putting in 5,000 new services each year. But right-of-way maintenance is one of our biggest investments at the cooperative, making sure those lines are clear and not causing ourselves more problems by not doing that. But, and as Tommy said, training is so huge for us.
So we do. We do the training. The training is almost a nonstop week-to-week deal that we do. And I think a lot of cooperatives operate that way. But you mentioned right away. Right away is the first thing that impacts us when the wind gets up. Yep. Always the first thing. You would think it might be lightning or heavy rainfall or something like. It's wind almost every time. It's the better you can maintain your right away, your vegetation overall, the better you served you are during storm season for sure.
Yep. And, we can get a serious afternoon thunderstorm with no warning. Hurricanes, we're lucky to have a little bit of advance notice.
That's right.
But you can get a good pop-up that can cause some trouble.
Yeah, and even with all the right-of-way maintenance we do, once it starts raining a good bit, the ground gets soggy, we get a little bit of wind, all of a sudden we've got trees falling, and even though we maintained a good right-of-way, sometimes those trees come in there or a limb falls down, and it may not seem like a big storm, but it can definitely inconvenience folks.
No, you look at how many trees we have that impact us every time we have a wind event, non-tropical related, trees from outside of our right of way. Things that we can't control end up impacting reliability in one form or another. So.
Right.
Yep.
Well, one of the interesting things, actually, I just heard recently, and you were just talking about the major storm plan. At one point, not too far distant past, we didn't have a major storm plan. It took Hurricane Hugo coming through our system, is the way I heard it, for us to really sit down and come up with the plan that we have today.
So that's right. As I understand it as well, that was before my tenure, but I think Hugo was the storm that initiated our awareness in the need to have a comprehensive playbook, so to speak, for us to operate under when you have something that affects so much of your system. And obviously, you guys working here with us, that we were 100% out of service. Every member that we had at the time during Hugo was out of service, and that's, knock on wood, that's the only time since Berkeley was incorporated as a cooperative that we've had 0 meters turning.
Right. And
we hope that's the last time, but we've had some big events since then, but not anything that significant. Then in 2014, I think you heard me say this a while back when we reviewed the major storm plan with each location during safety meetings. We did a big overhaul of that plan in 2014 after Winter Storm Pax. We saw some holes, so to speak, in the plan, some deficient areas where we could modify parts of the plan and make them separate attachments to the plan that allowed us to update them more easily than digging through the body of the plan itself. So it worked good. We do those every year. It's become very systematic for us to work through those attachments and update them.
And it really is an enviable plan. We, as a cooperative, we do a lot of knowledge sharing, and your team has been tapped a good bit to share the plan so other co-ops can adopt it as something similar that fits their needs.
We've had cooperatives across the country that requested to look at our plan to go through it, and we've shared it with them. And many times I've heard through collaborative training with other co-ops that how robust the plan is and what a great job we did with the plan. And now I'd love to tell you I can take credit for that, but that plan came from a whole lot of folks before me that put that in place. So
yeah.
Well, I know one of the big parts of the plan and, talking about dealing with other cooperatives is mutual aid.
That's right.
And one of the guiding principles of an electric cooperative is cooperation among cooperatives. Now, mutual aid, it works both ways, obviously. We go to other people's systems when they need help, and we invite people in to help us when we have major outages. As a cooperative, isn't there an advantage, for like a cooperative system, and there being people will be able to come in and immediately start working because our system is sort of similar to other cooperatives in terms of like the way it's built?
Yep, very true. They our mutual aid agreements, it's not only is it convenient and functionally meaningful for us to have those in place, but FEMA requires that they're in place ahead of any event. So that's another part of our systematic updating that we do every year. As recently this year as February, we sent crews out of state Georgia. Yeah. Was it Georgia? I think it was Georgia was the last one. We have these mutual aid agreements in place with other states early on before any normal storm would impact anybody. We have those in place. We were lucky enough to have that engaged and already implemented when we got the request from Georgia to come. Snapping Shoals EMC was the name of the cooperative. So if you think about that, especially in a neighboring state, you've got incredible amount of resources in Georgia. You got some of the biggest co-op, 2 or 3 of the top 5 or 6 co-ops in size in the country are in Georgia, and we have solid relationships with those folks, as well as mutual aid agreements with their state. So big deal.
So I think we've established that Berkeley Electric is ready to meet the demands of any storm. And we've really been through our mix of storms, floods, ice storms, hurricanes. I'd like to say when things are at their worst, we're at our best. But so let's say a storm is forecast to hit our area.
Right.
What immediately starts snapping into place? What are our internal preparations?
So obviously, once there's a named storm or the weather itself, it could be any event. The weather itself predicts that we're going to be impacted. It's too late then to start securing material and that stuff. If that's what you're waiting on, then you're behind already. But since we proactively do that early on, when we know that there's an imminent threat to our system, we start engaging our mutual aid partners, the folks we have those agreements with. We start preparing our system itself, our facilities, our folks, personnel. Biggest resource we have is our personnel. So engaging them, getting them involved in preparing their homes, their personal situation is different for everybody. So we give them the opportunity to take care of the things that they need at home. And then obviously when that's done, we start preparing our buildings, things that might blow around at the offices, fuel supplies at the offices, all that stuff. We use it every day. A lot of this equipment and material, even expendables like fuel or something in the warehouse that's expendable, we use it every day. So we got to maintain that supply. But we start, making sure that all those are in place. And then we end up bringing, based on what the forecast is, we'll start planning for mutual aid at that point, to bring extra resources in. So,
well, I mean, for those of you who are unaware, we're actually in a new building and sitting in our brand new recording studio as well inside of our new building. We've had a couple of smaller events now that have given us an opportunity to sort of test the legs on the new facility. How has the new headquarters impacted our ability to respond to storms?
Oh, great goodness, Micah! That
how much time we got?
Right? It's as you guys know, before June last year, we had 6, 7 different facilities, 7 or 8 facilities that we had equipment and personnel scattered through, and it wasn't by choice; it was by necessity. That when you grow. When the region that you live in and the region, the membership that you serve has grown for so long, such a sustained growth for this long, you have to grow with it. You either grow with it or you fall behind it. And we kept adding, we added resources, we added equipment, we added people as we needed them, employees as we needed them. And it ended up, we outgrew the old facility from the late 50s or 60s whenever they built that originally. Not only that, but if you listen to the folks who, and a fewer of these, but the folks that were here during Hugo that stayed in our building up there during Hugo, they never want to do that again. That old building, they said it made all kind of sound, scared them to death. But this facility we have now is, it's a hardened, robust built facility that's designed for the region that we live in and operate in. And it has the design and the fortitude that we can confidently bring our employees and equipment to this facility during a storm and know that they're safe and secure, and that when the storm blows through, we can open the doors and go to work. Our equipment's stored inside. Our people are inside safe. We can support the people inside. We can feed them.
Yep.
Everybody can shower and do the things that a critical utility is required to do when in a major weather event. So It's a big deal for us.
And our dispatch room is one of the major upgrades we were able to make with the new facility. I swear dispatch was probably not much bigger than this recording studio in our old office, but just having, the war room.
That's amazing technology that's in that room. Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Yeah. And
incredibly helpful.
Connected. I mean, all the people who need to be talking are within eyeshot of each other, and it's
that's right.
Very, very functional.
Yeah, great facility. We actually brought in help from out of town last year during Hurricane Ian, and Libby, we were able to get them all inside our facility, bring their equipment inside and their personnel inside instead of trying to scatter them around town, trying to find places for them to park. It was a big deal to be able to accommodate, the resources that you needed. So
yeah, I mean, we talk about how useful mutual aid is and the wonderful partnerships that we've built through that. But like you said, those crews have to be able to park somewhere.
Yep.
We have to be able to feed these hundreds and hundreds of people.
That's right.
So all that's possible where we are now.
Well, for those of you who are just tuning in, we are sitting down with Mr. Tommy Harvey, the Director of Distribution Operations at Berkeley Electric Cooperative, and we're talking storm safety. We're talking sort of what you do to get ready before, during, and what about after the storm, especially when it relates to safety. I mean, every time the power goes out, obviously the first question our members is going to have is, when is my power going to be back on?
When do we get lights back?
When do we get back lights on? And, what sort of is the order of restoration for those folks who may not be aware?
Sure. So obviously, there are things. Berkeley is not a transmission cooperative, so we depend on our transmission partners to serve our substations. Berkeley owns their substations, but we take our transmission service from a couple of different transmission providers. So the first thing we got to have is the transmission line back, and we depend on them for that. But as soon as we get that transmission service back, we start working on our main feeder lines, get substation on, work your main feeder lines. Then we'll work down our primary tap locations where we run high voltage down, secondary highways and that kind of thing. And then we obviously work down to the member outages, secondary outages and things like that. So there's a method to the madness, so to speak, on what you can put back on. Doesn't do a whole lot of good to put a house back on if you don't have a feeder, out in front of it that can serve it. So
and that's one of the reasons why you might see a truck driving past your house and not hooking the power back up, because they've got to go down line and fix the problem. Before they can even get power back to your house.
Or your neighbor. The street behind me has lights and I don't have lights. Why is that? So it's all about that systematic approach. You got to have the feeder on, then you got to get your tap lines on, and then you work your house's individual services. So it's it can happen. It will happen again where my neighbor has lights but I don't. But that is simply a part of the process that we can't avoid.
And one thing that's really important for our members to keep in mind is if some sort of major outage is forecast for our area, if you have a medical condition that requires electricity, you really have to make other arrangements. And I know if you live on a limited income or fixed income, that could be tough, but it's just a fact of the matter. Just plan for the worst and we'll get you on just as quick as we can. But if you do have a medical condition, you'll have to make other arrangements.
Yeah, it has to be considered, when we usually have time in front of a lot of our tropical events, and that's when we try to stress, locally at each office, but also through the media to make arrangements for folks that might have a critical need for service or something like that.
Yep.
Well, I mean, since we're talking about some of the things that affect our members and, some of the more popular questions that we get, another one that I know that I've heard before is, if we have underground lines, why aren't those a little bit more resistant to outages, and why is my power out if my whole neighborhood's got underground lines? A tree can't knock down an underground line, supposedly.
No, that's right. That's a fair statement. There's a whole lot that goes into where the underground lines are and where they're not. And I will tell you, the underground lines, generally speaking, cost about 3 times as much to install as an overhead line does. And it takes at least that long to do it. We can just build overhead lines so much quicker and much less expensive than we can underground line. But in in a tropical event, more often than not, your underground lines are more resilient and more robust and less likely to fail, to have issues. Now, you can still have high water events that we've talked about that impact your underground system as well. But if a tree's blown over on top of a switchgear, that's a whole lot more lengthy fix than it is a tree falling on an overhead line where you just put the wire back up. So.
Well, and kind of like we're talking about, the whole system's connected, and even though your home has underground service, at some point that technology has to come above ground.
That's right.
And, in our coastal areas, saltwater intrusion may be an issue above ground, or, the substation may be out, any number of things in between.
That's the thing. We've had events in our coastal area, coastal service area, that had they been imagine this, had they been overhead, we could have got it back on a whole lot quicker.
Right.
Yeah.
Storm surge.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a high wind is a different story, but when it's simply a high water event, my goodness, it works better when it's 35, 40 feet in the air. So.
Yeah.
And speaking of safety and high winds, now one of the things that, folks are always, wanting us to get out there and get the power restored as quickly as possible. But in terms of safety, our guys, in terms of winds, there's a limit, isn't there, for what they can operate the bucket in?
That's right. So Berkeley operates within the guidelines of the manufacturer's recommendation, which in the two manufacturers that we use, three really, bucket and aerial digger derrick manufacturers that we use, all of them, they're standard across the board, 35 mile per hour winds, they don't want to fly buckets. So they recommend that we don't, and we try to adhere to that. And obviously not so much to protect the equipment itself, but the folks who are in it and on it that are running it, they're, a priority. So.
And plus, if you go out too soon, and start restoring power, there's a good chance if there's still winds in the area, it's just going to get knocked right back out again.
That's right.
So you don't want to repeat the work that you're doing. I know that ice storms are particularly bad in that regard. We've gone through that. Some of that, the ice will coat the trees and it'll knock down the lines, and then when the ice melts, they go back up and knock down the lines again.
Oh, it's a vicious cycle for sure. Yep, no doubt.
Well, safety is paramount for, of course, our linemen and our personnel, but we also want our members to be safe. So what are some of the safety recommendations that we have for members after a storm when there might be down lines and debris and things of that nature? So
a couple things stand out every year. We talk about this. First of all is and the most common threat is a down line. We get these wires that are torn down for one reason or another, either wind or trees or both. Stay away from them. You can't assume that they're de-energized. We don't. Our guys are obviously, they're the experienced people who work with it, and they don't assume that they're de-energized. So we don't ever want first responders or our members or general public to assume that a line that's on the ground is de-energized. And second, the other big one is your generator use. Portable generator use is a big one. A couple of things about that is, one is being able to hook it up correctly. Portable generators are made to just be that. They're made to power an appliance or two and not to plug into your house. So that in itself, if you don't engage and plug in the portable generator into your house, then you eliminate a lot of possibility for backfeed and increasing the danger to our folk, our line personnel that are in the field. So use the portable generators for what they're designed to do. And if you have or want a standby generator for your house, a fixed unit, then have a qualified electrician, somebody that's an expert in installing them, doing it correctly, where you have the double throw switches that disconnects you from our system, the member from our system before the generator becomes active. So.
And Berkeley Electric has the most rooftop solar of any co-op in the state. So rooftop solar is also another consideration that
Absolutely.
Folks need to know how to disconnect it from the system.
So the big deal too is having those systems set up as to not backfeed onto our system. So what I will tell you, what our guys do is when they're in the field working, they will ground our lines, and if your generator or your solar, whatever energy source that you have, If it's not wired correctly, when our guys ground our side of the line to work on it, then it creates problems. It can actually burn up generators and damage solar systems. So it's important that it's done correctly.
Well, just to follow up real quick, if somebody does find a downline, who should they call first?
Downline, I would say call Berkeley. You can report that to us, and we will respond to that. If it's a downline that's arcing, please report that to us, and that becomes something that's paramount to us that we'll respond to immediately. It's not likely, but it's possible.
So if you don't know whose lines they are, could you just call 911?
You can call 911, absolutely.
And they'll figure it out.
Yep, they will. We actually provide some data to them that they can do that. It's absolutely call 911 if you need to. If you're not sure, and honestly, Libby, it can be in some areas it could be more than one person's line.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and also just for general purposes, folks, if you're listening, every pole is basically got a tag on it, so you can go to a nearby pole and you should be able to figure out if it's a Berkeley line or Santee Cooper line, and you can call the appropriate utility to have them come and take a look at it.
That's right.
Yep.
So, and probably one of our final tips on safety is to make sure people give the linemen plenty of space to work.
That's right.
To stay away from those work zones for a variety of reasons, but also just not to be a basic distraction. They're trying to get the power back on. Everybody wants their power on as quickly as possible, and the more you distract a lineman, the slower they're working.
Oh, absolutely. If they're taking the time to speak to our members, then that's time they're not restoring our members. So we certainly ask that we give those folks room to do their job. They set up work zones and buffers from themselves and our members and the public for a reason, and it's obviously paramount is their safety and the members and publics, but also to minimize distractions to the guys where they can stay focused and do what we pay them, what we need them to do.
Right, and if members are interested in figuring out what's going on during an outage, we maintain a live outage map that is on our website, so they can see a real-time view of outages around the system. They can follow us on our social media channels and on our website to get regular updates about what's being worked on, what's being restored. One thing I would like to point out, however, is if you are on social media, please do not report an outage through social media, because that is not linked to our outage management system. And we get so many comments during a storm that it's very easy to miss something important.
That's right.
So make sure you call our 188 number, 253 4232, or you can report it through your Smart Hub app online, so straight through your phone. Either way, those are the official channels for reporting an outage to make sure that it gets recorded correctly.
Yeah, so great thing about Smart Hub is that connects actually to our outage management system, and during a major event, we actually see that come up live in the Emergency Operations Center. So in the war room, so to speak, we see those notifications come up, immediately, real time. So that's a big help to us.
So, Micah, if I'm sitting at home, I don't have power, and I go on Facebook, and if I send Team BEC a message about when is my power going to be restored during a major outage, can you give me that information?
Unfortunately, probably not. I mean, we do a real good job of keeping up with the big areas where our crews are working, and during an outage, things are happening so quickly, and we have crews moving constantly to different areas and hooking back up power. When it comes to an individual service, it's a lot harder for us to be able to tell. And then also, once again, if we're going to dispatch and talking to them about, well, is this member's power back on? Is that member's power back on? Once again, we're sort of slowing down the process, because they're going to have to be listening for those important radio communications from the crews, and they're dispatching the crews and coordinating out in the field. So definitely keep up with us on Facebook to see the big broad strokes. And as things slow down in an outage, as we start to get down to the individual things, if you feel like you haven't had your outage addressed, you can always report it again through the outage management system and make sure that it's in there. But otherwise, Facebook and whatnot is a good way just to sort of keep up with the broad strokes. But that, believe it or not, is going to do it for our show. 30 minutes flies by just like that.
You're having fun, but we lose track of time, right?
So thank you for tuning in. And don't forget that you can now find us on all the popular podcast streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. You can also get a behind-the-scenes look at each episode on the Co-op's YouTube channel. So until next time, this has been the communications guy, Micah Ponce, and this does it for Power Talk.
Ha llegado el momento de las...
I'm going to have to edit that part, folks. Hit the wrong button, folks. This is a well-oiled machine here.
Work in progress.